What if the happiest day of your life was also the day your entire world shattered? Imagine this. You are 7 months pregnant, walking down the aisle towards your millionaire husband, the man you adore. Your wedding is a fairy tale, a dream come true. But then, you overhear a conversation not meant for your ears, a conversation that reveals your perfect husband is not who you think he is. And your marriage is built on a devastating lie. This isn't just a story of cheating. It's a story of a woman who lost everything, only to discover the unbreakable strength she never knew she had. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. It's always amazing to see this community come together. If you enjoy powerful stories, subscribe and hit the bell. Now, let's dive in. The late afternoon sun of October, a perfect honeyed gold, streamed through the arched windows of the Croft family's ancestral estate. It was the kind of light poets wrote about, the kind that made everything it touched seem blessed. For Celine, standing in the bridal suite, it felt like a celestial endorsement of the day she had dreamed of since she was a little girl, sketching fantasy castles in her notebook. The dress, a cascade of ivory silk and delicate lace designed by Vera Wang herself, felt like a second skin. It was a gift from Adrian, of course. Everything was a gift from Adrian. The Croft estate, the 10-carat diamond on her finger that felt heavier than its physical weight, the very air of opulent tranquility she breathed. It was all part of the Adrian Croft experience. She smoothed a hand over the gentle, pronounced curve of her belly. 7 months. Their son, their little Noah, was nestled safely inside, a tiny, perfect promise of their future. Adrian had been ecstatic when they found out it was a boy. "A Croft heir!" he'd boomed, his voice echoing with a pride that seemed almost primal. "My father will be overjoyed." Celine smiled at her reflection. Her face, usually defined by a quiet thoughtfulness, was illuminated with a joy so pure it felt fragile. She was an architect, a woman who understood foundations and structures. She believed in the structure of her life with Adrian. He was charismatic, ambitious and devastatingly handsome, with eyes the color of a stormy sea that could soften into a gentle harbor just for her. He had swept into her life, a whirlwind of power and affection, and had built her this gilded cage, a place so beautiful she never wanted to leave. "You look breathtaking, Cel," Maya, her maid of honor and best friend since college, said from the doorway. Her eyes were misty. "Seriously, like something out of a magazine." "I feel like I'm in a dream," Celine confessed, her voice a whisper. "Well, don't wake up. This dream cost more than my apartment building." Maya joked, but a flicker of something unreadable crossed her face. Maya had always been more grounded, more skeptical of the sheer scale of Adrian's wealth. She saw the power imbalance more clearly than Selena, who was blinded by love. "It's time," Maya said softly. As she walked towards the grand staircase that would lead her to the garden ceremony, Celine felt a pang of nostalgia. She clutched the small beaded purse in her hand. Inside was her something old, her grandfather's small brass compass. He had been a sailor, a man who navigated by the stars, and he'd always told her, "Know your true north, Lena Bean." Her heart swelled. Adrian was her true north now. The ceremony was a blur of scented roses, classical music from a string quartet, and the hundreds of smiling faces of high society. She saw Adrian waiting for her at the altar, looking impossibly dashing in his Tom Ford tuxedo. His smile was dazzling, a lighthouse guiding her home. She locked eyes with him, and the world fell away. It was just them. The reception was held in the estate's grand ballroom, a cavernous space with glittering chandeliers and a history that dripped from the frescoed ceiling. They danced their first dance, a slow, swaying waltz to a song Adrian had had commissioned just for them. He held her close, his hand resting protectively on her pregnant belly. "I love you, Mrs. Croft," he murmured into her hair, "more than you'll ever know." I love you too, she breathed, burying her face in his chest, inhaling the familiar, expensive scent of his cologne. An hour later, amid the clinking of champagne glasses and polite laughter, Celine felt a sudden, sharp need to sit down. Her ankles were swelling, and the baby was performing a vigorous gymnastics routine. She excused herself, promising to return in a few minutes. As she made her way towards a quieter anteroom, she remembered the compass. In the rush of the ceremony, she'd left her purse in the bridal suite. She wanted it with her. It was a silly, sentimental thought, but it felt important. Instead of taking the grand staircase, she took a staff corridor, a shortcut she and Adrian had used before. It led past the estate's old library, a room Adrian's father, Gregory Croft, used as his personal study. The door was slightly ajar, and the low murmur of voices drifted out. She recognized Adrian's voice immediately. He sounded different. Not the warm, adoring husband from the dance floor, but the sharp, decisive CEO she'd heard on conference calls. Curiosity piqued, she slowed her steps, her satin heels silent on the plush runner. The merger is contingent on this, Vivienne. You know that. Vivienne. Celine's brow furrowed. Vivienne Laurent was the daughter of Marcus Laurent, a rival tech mogul Adrian had been trying to forge an alliance with for over a year. She was beautiful, sharp, and from the same blue-blooded world as Adrian. Celine had always felt a prickle of insecurity around her. I know. Vivienne's voice was a low, sultry purr. But your father was very clear. The alliance isn't just between Croft Industries and Laurent Global. It's between the families. A bond. Celine's hand froze on the wall. A cold dread, heavy and suffocating, began to seep into her bones. And we're creating that bond, Adrian said. There was a rustling sound, like expensive fabric. My father is satisfied. He sees the wedding, he sees the pregnant wife. She's suitable, docile, the perfect image for the company. No one will look twice. Suitable, docile. The words struck Celine like physical blows. She wasn't his partner. She was a prop, an image. And the baby? Vivienne asked. The little heir? A beat of silence. Then Adrian's chilling reply. He'll be a Croft. That's all that matters. He secures the dynasty. Celine did her part. Honestly, once he's born, her role becomes largely ceremonial. The air left Celine's lungs. The gilded cage she had loved so much suddenly felt cold and sharp, its bars pressing in on her. Then came the sound that shattered her world completely. A soft, distinct moan of pleasure. Vivienne's, followed by a low chuckle from Adrian. Patience, darling, he said, his voice thick with a desire Celine hadn't heard since their own early, passionate days. The reception is long. I'll come find you later. Don't wear that dress for me. Promise? Vivienne cooed. I promise. Celine stumbled back, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a sob. She felt a wave of nausea so intense she had to grip the wall to keep from collapsing. The baby kicked, a sharp, insistent reminder of the life inside her. The life Adrian had just called a tool to secure his dynasty. She saw it all with horrifying clarity. The whirlwind romance, the perfect proposal, his insistence on a quick wedding before the baby was born. It wasn't a love story. It was a business transaction. She was the broodmare, bought and paid for to provide a veneer of respectability and an heir, while he solidified a corporate merger by sleeping with another woman. On their wedding day, the pain was a physical entity, a shard of ice piercing her heart. Betrayal wasn't a strong enough word. This was a complete and utter negation of her reality. Her love, her trust, their future. It was all a meticulously crafted illusion. Tears streamed down her face, silent and hot. For a moment, she wanted to burst through the door, to scream, to claw at their faces, to expose them in front of the whole world. But then, a different feeling began to surface, rising from the icy depths of her shock. It was cold, hard, and utterly unfamiliar. It was rage, a calculated, silent fury. He called her docile. He called her suitable. He thought she was a prop in his play. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand, her movements jerky. She looked down at her beautiful dress, at the diamond on her finger, at her swollen belly. They were all part of the costume, and she was done playing her part. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her mind. Know your true north. Her true north wasn't Adrian. It never had been. Her true north was the child kicking inside her. Her son. And she would be damned if she let him be raised as a pawn in the cold, cruel world of the Crofts. Slowly, deliberately, she pulled out her phone. Her hands trembled, but her resolve was hardening into steel. She opened the voice memo app and pressed record. Then, holding her breath, she crept closer to the library door. Angling the phone's microphone towards the gap, she would not be docile. She would not be ceremonial. She would be the architect of his downfall. The recording felt like a live grenade in her hand. Celine stood in the corridor, her heart hammering a frantic, painful rhythm against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, to run until the pristine lawns of the Croft estate were a distant memory. But another, colder instinct took over. The architect in her, the one who understood that a demolition required careful planning, held her in place. She needed more than just a recording of their post-coital whispers. She needed to understand the full scope of the contract she had unknowingly signed with her life. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, she smoothed down her dress, wiped the last traces of tears from her cheeks, and composed her face into a mask of serene bridal bliss. She practiced a small, slightly tired smile in the reflection of a silver platter left on a side table. It was the most difficult performance of her life. She walked back into the ballroom. The music was louder now, the atmosphere more boisterous. She spotted Adrian across the room, laughing with a group of investors, Vivian's father among them. He caught her eye and gave her a brilliant smile, raising his glass in a toast. The hypocrisy was so profound it was almost breathtaking. He was an artist of deceit. Celine smiled back, a perfect, loving smile that didn't reach her frozen eyes. She made her way to Maya, who was watching her with a concerned frown. "You okay?" Maya asked, her voice low. "You were gone for a while. You look pale." Celine couldn't speak the truth. Not yet. The words were too toxic. They would contaminate Maya's own happiness for the day. Just a bit overwhelmed. She lied, placing a hand on her stomach. "Noah's being a little acrobat tonight. Can you do me a huge favor?" "Anything. My purse is still in the bridal suite. Could you get it for me? And maybe find Gregory Croft's briefcase? I think he left it in the study. Adrian mentioned needing a document from it." The lie came easily, slick with newfound purpose. Maya's brow furrowed. "Gregory's briefcase? Why?" "Adrian needs the finalized Laurent Global merger proposal. He wants to give Marcus Laurent a signed copy tonight as a wedding gift." "A gesture," Celine improvised, the details flowing from a place of pure, cold invention. "He asked me to get it, but I just can't face those stairs again." It was a plausible power player move Adrian would make. Maya, accustomed to the bizarre ways of the ultra-rich, nodded. "Okay, weirdo. One briefcase coming up. Stay off your feet." As Maya disappeared, Celine moved through the crowd, a ghost at her own wedding feast. She accepted congratulations, smiled for photos, and allowed Adrian to pull her in for a kiss. A chaste public peck that felt like a brand of ownership. His touch made her skin crawl. Maya returned minutes later, looking flustered. She handed Celine her small purse. "Got your bag, but the briefcase." "Cell, the study door was locked, and I could have sworn I heard voices inside." Celine's blood ran cold. Of course, they were still in there. "It's fine," she said, her voice tight. "Don't worry about it." She now had the recording on her phone, which was tucked safely inside the purse with her grandfather's compass. But she knew the document she'd invented, the merger proposal, was the key. It would lay out the terms, the timelines, the real nature of the bond between the families. She needed to wait. The night stretched before her, an eternity of charades. She watched Adrian, studying him as if he were a stranger. She saw the flick of his eyes towards the library corridor. She saw Vivian emerge 20 minutes later, her lipstick perfectly reapplied, a triumphant, secretive smile playing on her lips. They thought they were invisible. They thought she was blind. The reception finally wound down in the early hours of the morning. The last of the guests departed, leaving behind a ballroom that smelled of wilted flowers and stale champagne. The staff moved silently, clearing the debris of the lavish affair. "Tired, my love?" Adrian asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. He rested his chin on her shoulder, his hands coming to rest on their son. "Exhausted," she replied, her body rigid. "Let's go up. Our life begins now." The bridal suite was a parody of romance. Rose petals were scattered across the bed, and candles flickered on every surface. It looked like a tomb. As Adrian shed his tuxedo jacket, Selene walked over to the large mahogany desk in the sitting area. "What are you doing?" he asked, unbuttoning his shirt. "Just looking for some aspirin," she lied, opening a drawer. Her hands were searching for something else entirely. Adrian was meticulously organized. He kept copies of all major contracts in his home office safes. Surely, a deal this monumental? Her fingers brushed against a leather-bound folder tucked at the back of the bottom drawer. It was unmarked. Her heart leaped. She pulled it out. "What's that?" Adrian's voice was casual, but she detected a new edge to it. She opened the folder. The top page read, "Project Dynasty, a proposal for the strategic alliance of Croft Industries and Laurent Global." Her eyes scanned the dense text. It was all there, laid out in cold corporate language. Clauses about consolidating market share, leveraging assets, and then a section titled Familial Integration. It detailed the expected union, the strengthening of the bond through social and personal ties. It didn't name names, but it didn't have to. The final page was a signatory sheet. It was signed by Gregory Croft, Marcus Laurent, and Adrian. It was dated 6 months ago, 2 weeks before Adrian had proposed to her. She felt the last vestiges of her love curdle into something akin to hate. "Celine, put that down!" Adrian's voice was low and dangerous. The mask was gone. The charming husband had been replaced by the ruthless CEO. She turned to face him, the folder held in her hand like a shield. "Docile," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "Was that your word, or your father's?" Adrian's face went pale. He took a step towards her. "You don't know what you're talking about. Her role becomes largely ceremonial once the heir is born." She quoted his own words back at him, her voice dripping with a venom she didn't know she possessed. Realization, then fury, flashed in his eyes. He lunged for the folder, but she was faster, stepping back. "How?" he snarled. "You left the library door open," she said simply. "You should be more careful when you're closing your deals." She saw the sequence of emotions on his face. Disbelief, followed by a flicker of fear, quickly replaced by arrogant dismissal. He thought he could manage this. He thought he could manage her. "Celine, listen to me," he said, his voice dropping into a placating tone. "You're pregnant. You're emotional. You're misunderstanding a business conversation." "Am I?" She held up her small purse. "I don't think the recording I made will misunderstand it. I'm sure my lawyer will find it perfectly clear. Vivian moans quite clearly, you'll be pleased to know. It's excellent audio quality." His face turned to stone. The color drained from it completely. He stared at her, and for the first time, she saw him for what he was. A man trapped in a cage of his own. A cage built by his father's ambition. but she felt no pity. Only a vast, empty chasm where her love used to be. "What do you want?" he finally whispered, the words ragged. "Money? Name your price. I'll give you anything." That was the moment she knew she had won. He thought he could buy her silence, just as he had bought her as a wife. "I want nothing from you, Adrian," she said, her voice resonating with a newfound power. She walked over to the closet, the one filled with designer clothes he had bought for her. She pulled out the simple canvas bag she had arrived with all those months ago. She began to pack her old things. A worn copy of Jane Eyre, a framed photo of her and Maya, the few clothes that were truly hers. "What are you doing? You can't leave," he said, his voice rising in panic. "Think of the optics, the press. My father will—" "I don't care about your father," she cut him off, turning to face him, her hand on the doorknob. "You have your deal. You have your dynasty. And you have Vivian. You've made your choice." She held up the folder. "This, however, is my severance package, my copy." Before he could react, she opened the door and walked out of the suite, leaving him standing amidst the romantic ruins of their wedding night. She didn't look back. She walked down the grand staircase, past the wilting flowers and the ghosts of her shattered dreams. The night air was cool on her hot cheeks. She didn't have a car, a plan, or a destination. All she had was a canvas bag, a damning recording, a secret contract, and the sun growing inside her. As she walked down the long, manicured driveway of the Croft estate, the gravel crunching under her feet, she pulled out her grandfather's compass. In the moonlight, the needle trembled for a moment before settling, pointing resolutely north. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she knew which way she was going. The bus ride was a rattling, anonymous journey into the gray light of dawn. Celine had used the cash from her purse to buy a ticket to the farthest destination on the board. Port Blossom, a small coastal town she'd only seen on a map, chosen for its obscurity and its distance from the glittering metropolis that held her past. She sat with her head against the cool glass of the window, the damning folder pressed against her side, watching the city lights bleed into sprawling suburbs and then, finally, into the quiet, rolling countryside. She didn't cry. The shock had cauterized her sorrow, leaving behind a raw, resolute numbness. Port Blossom was exactly what she needed. Quiet, unassuming, and weathered by sea salt and time. The air smelled of brine and fried fish. Weather-beaten fishing boats bobbed in the harbor, their reflections a watercolor smudge on the gray water. It was the antithesis of the Croft estate's polished grandeur. It was real. She found a small furnished apartment for rent above a closed bakery, paying the first 2 months' rent in cash. It was sparse, with mismatched furniture and windows that rattled when the wind blew. But it was a sanctuary. It was hers. The first thing she did was buy a cheap, prepaid phone and a lockbox for the folder, and her old phone containing the recording. She hid the box under a loose floorboard in the closet. The first few weeks were a blur of survival. Morning sickness, a constant companion, was now compounded by the heavy weight of loneliness and fear. She'd wake up in the middle of the night, her heart pounding, the memory of Adrian's voice in the library replaying in her mind. The betrayal was a living thing, a phantom that shared her small bed. She lived frugally, her dwindling cash a constant nagging worry. She bought her food from the local market, her clothes from a second-hand shop. Her pregnancy was becoming more pronounced, and the stares of the townspeople, though not unkind, were a reminder of her solitary situation. She was an anomaly in a town where everyone knew everyone else's history. One day, overwhelmed by a sudden wave of despair, she sat on a bench overlooking the harbor, tears finally beginning to fall. Her son deserved more than this. He deserved more than a mother who was running on fumes, paralyzed by the past. "Tough tide today, dear." Celine looked up to see an older woman with kind, crinkled eyes and a cloud of white hair. She was holding a tray of steaming muffins. "I'm Eleanor Laurent," the woman said, sitting down beside her. She wasn't related to the other Lawrence, a fact she found endlessly amusing. It was a cruel, cosmic joke. Eleanor ran the town's most popular cafe, the Daily Grind. "You're new here. I see you walk by every morning. You always look like you're carrying the world on your shoulders." Something in Eleanor's gentle, no-nonsense demeanor made Celine's defenses crumble. For the first time since she'd left, she told someone a part of her story. She kept the details vague. A bad breakup, a controlling ex, the need for a fresh start. Eleanor listened patiently, nodding. "The world breaks everyone," she said, quoting Hemingway without realizing it. "And afterward, many are strong at the broken places." "What did you do before all this?" "I'm an architect," Celine said, the words feeling foreign on her tongue. It felt like a lifetime ago. "An architect?" Eleanor's eyes lit up. "Well, I'll be. This old town could use an architect. Our historic pier is falling apart, and the town council's plans for it are about as creative as a cardboard box." That small conversation planted a seed. The next day, Celine walked down to the pier. It was a beautiful, dilapidated structure, a skeleton of its former self. She spent hours there, sketching in a cheap notebook she'd bought. She didn't just sketch a repair. She reimagined it. A new blueprint began to form, not just for the pier, but for herself. She drew a multi-use community space, with stalls for fishermen to sell their catch, benches for locals to gather, a small, safe play area for children, and planters for a community garden. She incorporated sustainable materials and designs that honored the town's history while looking towards its future. The project consumed her. It was a way to build something beautiful out of something broken. It was a metaphor for her own life. She worked out of her tiny apartment, her drafting table a piece of plywood set on 2 sawhorses. She poured all her training, her passion, and her pain into the drawings. This was who she was. Not Mrs. Adrian Croft, the docile wife, but Celine Quinn, the architect. Meanwhile, she knew Adrian would be searching for her. She had cut off all contact with Maya, sending only a single cryptic text from her burner phone. "I'm safe. Don't look for me. I'll explain one day." It was cruel, but necessary. Adrian would go to Maya first, and Celine couldn't risk her friend getting caught in the crossfire. Her fears were confirmed one afternoon when she saw a sleek, black car with tinted windows cruise slowly down the main street. It was the kind of car that didn't belong in Port Blossom. It circled the town twice before disappearing. It was a probe, a scout. He was using his vast resources, sweeping the grid, searching for the woman who had dared to walk away. The fear was a cold knot in her stomach. But her resolve held. She was not the same woman who had stood in that corridor. With her pier proposal complete, she took a deep breath and walked into a town council meeting. She was a pregnant, unknown woman with no credentials to her name but the drawings she held in her hand. She stood before the council of gruff fishermen and skeptical shop owners, and she presented her vision. She spoke with a passion and clarity that surprised even herself. She wasn't just talking about wood and nails. She was talking about community, legacy, and building a future. They were stunned into silence. Her plan was brilliant, heartfelt, and economically sound. It was everything they wanted, but didn't know how to ask for. The council approved her proposal in principle, commissioning a formal feasibility study. It wasn't a paid job yet, but it was a foothold. It was a beginning. For the first time in months, Celine felt a flicker of genuine hope. She was building again. That evening, as she was leaving the town hall, a man was waiting for her in the shadows. Her heart seized with terror, thinking it was one of Adrian's men. "Celine?" The voice was familiar. She squinted into the gloom. It was Marcus, Adrian's best man. He looked haggard, his expensive suit rumpled. "What do you want?" she asked, her body tensing, ready to run. "Adrian is losing his mind," Marcus said, his voice low and urgent. "He sent me. Not to bring you back, but to talk. He's not sleeping. He's not eating. His father is threatening to disinherit him. The Laurent deal is on the verge of collapse because Vivian is furious about the scandal of you leaving." "A scandal of my making? That's rich!" Selene scoffed. "He knows he messed up, Selene, terribly," Marcus pleaded. "He's terrified, not just for the business, but for you, for the baby. He wants to talk, no threats, no tricks, just a conversation. He's willing to come here, on your terms." Selene looked at Marcus's desperate face. She thought of the black car. The hunt was over. He had found her. She could keep running, but for how long? Her son would be born soon. He deserved a father, even a flawed one. More importantly, he deserved to be financially secure, safe from the toxic influence of the Croft dynasty. The time for hiding was over. The time for negotiation had begun. "Tell him he can meet me," she said, her voice steady and firm. "At the Daily Grind Cafe, tomorrow, at noon. He comes alone. And Marcus," she added, her eyes as hard as the sea-worn pebbles on the beach, "tell him to bring his best offer, because my terms will not be cheap." The bell above the door of the Daily Grind jingled, announcing Adrian's arrival. He looked utterly out of place. His tailored cashmere coat and $1,000 shoes were an affront to the cozy, mismatched charm of the cafe. But it wasn't his clothes that struck Selene. It was his face. He was thinner, with dark circles under his eyes that even his residual tan couldn't hide. The arrogant swagger was gone, replaced by a raw, hollowed-out anxiety. He saw her sitting in a booth by the window, a cup of herbal tea steaming in front of her. She didn't stand. She simply watched him approach, her expression unreadable. Her pregnancy was now impossible to hide. The swell of her stomach was a silent, powerful testament to everything that lay between them. He slid into the booth opposite her, his movements hesitant. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. The air crackled with unspoken words, with the ghosts of love and betrayal. "Selene," he began, his voice raspy. "You look, well, I'm building a life here," she said, her tone level. It was not an invitation for small talk. "You wanted to talk, so talk." He flinched at her coldness. I'm sorry." The words sounded inadequate, pathetic, even to him. "What I did, it was unforgivable. There's no excuse." "No, there isn't," she agreed. "But there was a reason. Project Dynasty, I believe it was called. I read the whole thing. It was very thorough." Adrian's gaze dropped to the table. He looked like a man confessing to a crime. "My father, he's been planning that merger since I was in college. He raised me for it. He said love was a luxury, but legacy was an obligation. He saw you, and he saw perfection. Beautiful, intelligent, from a good family but not a powerful one. No messy alliances. You were the perfect, unimpeachable choice to be the mother of the next Croft. He cornered me. He said the entire future of the company depended on a bond with the Lawrence, and Vivian was the price. So you decided to have it all," Selene finished for him, her voice laced with ice. "The respectable wife and heir, and the corporate mistress on the side. My congratulations on your ambition, Adrian. It's truly boundless." "It wasn't like that," he said desperately. "I did love you, Selene. I still do. In my own twisted, broken way, I love you. I told myself it was just business. I separated it in my mind. I thought I could keep those worlds apart, protect you from it." "By having sex with her at our wedding?" Selene's voice was dangerously quiet. "While I was carrying your son? You weren't protecting me, Adrian. You were using me. My body, my love, my trust. It was all just capital for you to spend. The truth of her words hung between them, undeniable and ugly. He had no defense. "What do you want to fix this?" he asked, his voice cracking. "I'll call off the deal with Laurent. I'll walk away from my father, from everything. We can start over." Celine almost laughed. It was a bitter, painful sound. "Start over? There is no we, Adrian. You burned that bridge. You dynamited it. This isn't a negotiation for our marriage. That is over. This is a negotiation for our divorce, and for the future of our son." He visibly deflated, the last glimmer of hope dying in his eyes. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay, what are your terms?" This was the moment she had been preparing for. She had spent sleepless nights strategizing, thinking like the ruthless CEO he had taught her to be. "First," she began, leaning forward, her eyes locked on his. "Our son will have my last name. Quinn. He will not be a Croft. He will not be a pawn in your father's dynasty." Adrian recoiled as if struck. "Celine, no, he's my son. The heir—" "He is my son," she corrected him fiercely. "And he will not be sacrificed on the altar of Croft Industries. That is non-negotiable." He saw the steel in her eyes and, after a tense silence, gave a slow, defeated nod. "Second," she continued, pressing her advantage, "you will establish a trust fund for him. A significant one. $10 million. Adrian's eyes widened, but he didn't argue. It was a fraction of his worth. "But," she added, "I will be the sole trustee. The funds cannot be touched by you, your father, or anyone from your family, for any reason, until Noah is 25 years old. My lawyers will draft an ironclad agreement that firewalls him completely from your financial and familial influence." He swallowed hard. She was systematically stripping him of every ounce of control, the one thing he and his father valued above all else. "Agreed," he rasped. "Third, you will not contest the divorce on any grounds. The official reason cited in all legal documents and public statements will be your infidelity." This was the blow that landed hardest. It wasn't about money. It was about pride. The pristine, powerful Croft name would be publicly tarnished. Gregory would be apoplectic. "Celine, please," he begged. "Think of the press, the scandal. It will ruin the family name." "Your actions ruined it," she retorted. "You just did it behind closed doors. I'm simply opening the door. You built your empire on an image of integrity. It's time for a market correction. The world will know exactly why I left you." He stared at her, a strange mix of horror and awe on his face. This was not the gentle, loving woman he had married. This was a queen, forged in the fires of his betrayal, dictating the terms of his surrender. "And finally," she said, her voice softening almost imperceptibly, "if you want to be a father to him, a real father, not just a name on a birth certificate, you will have that chance. You can have visitation. You can be in his life. But it will be on my terms. Here, in Port Blossom. You will come into his world. He will never be forced to enter yours." She was offering him a sliver of redemption, a path to fatherhood, stripped of all the power and privilege he was used to. It was the only thing he truly wanted, and the only thing she could graciously give. Tears welled in Adrian's eyes. They were not the manipulative tears of a man trying to win sympathy, but the genuine, heartbroken tears of a man who had lost everything that truly mattered. "Okay," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Yes, okay, Celine, whatever you want." She sat back, the immense tension draining from her. It was done. She had protected her son. She had secured their future. She had claimed her power. "My lawyer will be in touch with yours tomorrow," she said, her voice purely business again. She stood up, her hand resting on her belly. "The next time I see you, Adrian, I expect it will be at the hospital. I'll let you know when your son is born." She turned and walked out of the cafe, leaving him alone in the booth, a millionaire who had just discovered the true cost of his choices. As she stepped out into the crisp, salty air of Port Blossom, she didn't feel triumphant. She didn't feel vengeful. She just felt free. The demolition was complete. Now she could finally begin to build. 4 months later, Noah Quinn was born with a healthy cry and his mother's determined eyes. The delivery room was quiet, filled only with the supportive presence of Maya, whom Selene had finally called, and the gentle guidance of the local doctor. Adrian was not there. Selene had sent him a text message with the news, as promised, but had made it clear that this moment was hers alone. Holding her son for the first time, Selene felt the last, fractured pieces of her old life click into a new and profound whole. The pain, the betrayal, the rage, it all melted away in the overwhelming, fierce love she felt for this tiny, perfect human. He was her true north. He was her reason. He was her masterpiece. Life in Port Blossom took on a new rhythm, paced by feedings, diaper changes, and the soft gurgles of a contented baby. The divorce was finalized quickly and quietly, just as she had dictated. The news of Adrian Croft's infidelity, confirmed in a sterile joint statement, sent a brief ripple through the financial world before being replaced by the next scandal. The Croft-Laurent merger collapsed spectacularly. Vivienne Laurent, unwilling to be tied to a damaged brand, walked away, and Marcus Laurent, seeing the rot within the Croft dynasty, pulled his support. Gregory Croft's grand plan had crumbled into dust. Celine's own project, however, was thriving. The town, buoyed by her vision and a surprising state grant she had helped secure, had officially commissioned her as the lead architect for the pier renovation. Quinn Architecture, currently operating out of her living room, had its first major contract. She worked while Noah slept, the baby monitor beside her drafting table. Her designs were filled with a light and purpose that had been absent from her earlier corporate work. She was building not for prestige or profit, but for people, for community. 2 months after Noah was born, Adrian came to Port Blossom. He didn't arrive in a black car, but in a modest rental sedan. He wore jeans and a simple sweater, looking more like a man than a magnate. He brought with him not an expensive gift, but a simple hand-carved wooden boat for his son. Their first meeting was in the park. It was awkward, tentative. Selene watched, her heart a tight knot of apprehension, as Adrian held his son for the first time. She saw the wonder and the profound regret in his eyes. He was clumsy, unsure, but gentle. He started visiting every other weekend. He stayed in the town's only motel. He didn't try to win Selene back. He didn't talk about his old life. He focused solely on Noah. He learned to change a diaper, to warm a bottle, to recognize the difference between a hungry cry and a tired one. He walked with Selene along the beach, pushing the stroller, the two of them maintaining a careful, respectful distance. During one of these walks, he finally told her what had happened. "My father disowned me," he said, his eyes on the horizon. "When the Laurent deal fell through, he said I had failed in my one and only duty. He cut me off completely." "I'm sorry," Selena said, and she was surprised to find that she meant it. "Don't be," Adrian replied with a wry, tired smile. "It was the most liberating day of my life. I'm on my own now. I started a small tech consulting firm. Just me and 2 other guys. We're working on an app to help nonprofits manage their logistics. It's the first thing I've ever built that I'm actually proud of." Selene looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw the flicker of a new man emerging from the wreckage of the old one. The redemption wasn't for her. It was for him. He was breaking ground on a new life, just as she was. A year later, the new Port Blossom Community Pier had its grand opening. It was a beautiful, sunny day. The structure was magnificent, a sweeping curve of sustainable timber and recycled steel that looked both modern and timeless. It was filled with laughing children, local vendors, and the proud townspeople who had helped build it. Celine stood to the side, holding a toddling Noah's hand, watching her vision come to life. Maya was beside her, beaming with pride. Across the pier, she saw Adrian. He wasn't with them. He was just another face in the crowd, watching his son take wobbly steps towards his mother. He caught Selena's eye and gave her a small, genuine smile. A smile not of possession or persuasion, but of respect. She smiled back. There was no romance there, no rekindling of a dead flame. But there was something else, a fragile, hard-won peace, an understanding. They were no longer husband and wife, but they were architects of a different kind of structure, a family, redesigned and rebuilt on a foundation of honesty, forgiveness, and the shared love for their son. Celine knelt, her eyes level with her child's. "Look, Noah," she whispered, pointing towards the sparkling water and the endless horizon. "We built that." She had lost a fairy tale wedding and a millionaire husband. She had been betrayed, broken, and left with nothing. But standing here today, on this pier she had designed, with the son she adored, in the community she had helped to heal, she knew she hadn't lost anything of value. She had found it all. She had found her true north. And she was finally, truly, home. Celine's story is a powerful reminder that our deepest betrayals can often lead to our greatest transformations. She was stripped of a life she thought she wanted, only to build one she truly needed, on her own terms. Her strength wasn't in public revenge, but in quiet resolve, strategic intelligence, and the fierce, protective love for her child. It's a story about finding your own true north, even when you're lost in the storm. What did you think of Celine's final decision? Was it justice, or mercy, or both? We'd love to read your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of resilience, redemption, and rebuilding moved you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who might need to hear it. And for more emotional stories that explore the complexities of the human heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. Thank you for watching. The cold, sterile air of the boardroom felt like a ghost of a life she once knew, scented with expensive leather and the faint metallic tang of fear. Celeste Quinn stood before the long mahogany table, a silent figure of judgment against the sprawling, indifferent backdrop of the Chicago skyline. Below them, the city hummed with life, unaware of the tectonic shift happening on the 50th floor. Across from her sat Damon Sterling. His face, usually a confident, handsome mask, was a pallid landscape of raw disbelief. He looked as though he'd been struck by lightning, the shock still sizzling through his veins. His custom-tailored Tom Ford suit, once a second skin, a symbol of his inherited power, now seemed to hang off his frame like a borrowed costume on a man who had forgotten his lines. His knuckles were white where he gripped the edge of the table, his only anchor in a world that had just been ripped from its foundations. Next to him, Vivian Vale, the architect of Celeste's initial ruin, was visibly crumbling. Her perfect crimson-painted lips, usually curved in a self-satisfied smirk, trembled uncontrollably. A single, manicured hand clutched Damon's arm, not for support, but with the desperation of a drowning woman pulling her rescuer under with her. They looked at Celeste not as the quiet, accommodating woman they had discarded, but as an apparition, a force of nature they had foolishly mistaken for a gentle breeze and had now returned as a hurricane. 3 years. 3 years of silence, of struggle, of a rebirth forged in fire and solitude. And now, the woman he had fired from this very company, the wife he had abandoned when she was carrying his child, was the new majority shareholder. Her voice, when she finally spoke, did not carry the heat of rage, but the chilling calm of a settled storm, a quiet power that was far more terrifying. "Hello, Damon," she said. the two words cutting through the suffocating silence like shards of glass. Let's talk about restructuring. 3 years earlier. The penthouse on North Michigan Avenue was a testament to curated perfection. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, glinting off chrome fixtures and illuminating the fine grain of the Italian marble floors. It was a home designed to be photographed for magazines, a space that screamed success with a silent, deafening roar. For Celeste Quinn, it was the beautiful gilded cage she had helped build, bar by gleaming bar. As a rising star at Sterling Holdings, one of Chicago's most formidable real estate development firms, she had poured her architectural soul into its projects. She remembered the pride she felt when her design for the atrium of the new Lakeshore Gateway building, a soaring, light-filled space with a living wall she had fought for, was approved. Damon had taken the credit for it at the press conference, of course, calling it his vision, but in private, he'd told her she was his secret weapon. It was there, amidst the blueprints and scale models, that she had met Damon Sterling, the heir apparent, a man who wore his legacy like a bespoke suit, perfectly tailored, effortlessly impressive, and designed to conceal whatever lay beneath. Their romance was a meticulously orchestrated PR campaign that had somehow blossomed into genuine affection. A whirlwind of gallery openings, charity galas, and weekend trips to the Hamptons culminated in a lavish wedding featured in modern luxury. Moving into the penthouse felt less like starting a home and more like ascending to a throne. Celeste had loved him with an earnest, all-consuming passion that, in retrospect, felt naive. She believed in the future he painted for them, a diptych of power and beauty. He, the visionary CEO who would eclipse his father's formidable shadow. She, the groundbreaking architect at his side, shaping the city's skyline. Now at 28, she was 6 months pregnant with their first child, a daughter. It was the final, perfect brushstroke on their masterpiece of a life. "It's going to be a legacy, Cell," Damon had murmured that very morning, his lips brushing her temple, his scent a familiar, comforting mix of sandalwood and ambition. He was talking about the Olympus Tower, his flagship project, a skyscraper so audacious it aimed to redefine luxury living. But she had heard the words as a promise for everything. Their life, their family, their shared future. The first crack in the facade appeared as a faint, almost imperceptible tremor, the kind you dismiss as the building settling. It was the way Damon had started guarding his phone, angling the screen away with a casualness that was too deliberate. It was the late nights at the office that stretched into the early hours, his excuses becoming more elaborate, his explanations for the faint floral scent clinging to his shirts more creative. Stress, pressure, the Olympus launch. She wanted to be the supportive wife, the understanding partner. She would accept his excuses, her own anxieties feeling like a betrayal of their perfect union. She'd rub the tension from his broad shoulders, her hands tracing the knots of stress, and whisper reassurances into the darkness of their cavernous bedroom. But doubt, once planted in the fertile soil of insecurity, is a hardy and insidious weed. It grew in the dark, quiet moments when she lay awake in their king-sized bed, the vast, empty space beside her feeling colder than ever. She found herself analyzing his words, searching for hidden meanings, her mind becoming a detective in a crime she prayed hadn't been committed. The truth, when it came, wasn't a dramatic, rain-swept confrontation. It was quiet, banal, and utterly soul-crushing. It arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, delivered by the cold, impersonal glow of a tablet screen. She was looking for a document for their mortgage broker in Damon's sleek, minimalist home office, a room she had designed, when she saw it lying on the polished concrete desk, unlocked and open. A thread of messages. The name at the top was Vivienne Vale. Vivienne, the new head of marketing at Sterling Holdings. A woman with raven hair, a razor-sharp smile, and a predatory ambition Celeste had clocked from their very first meeting. Vivienne, who looked at Damon with an unnerving mixture of professional deference and personal hunger. The messages weren't just flirtatious, they were a chronicle of an entire secret life, a detailed ledger of her husband's betrayal. Vivienne. Is she asleep yet? I can't stop thinking about last night. Damon. Soon. Don't worry about her. It's almost over. I've already started the paperwork with legal. Vivienne. I hate that you're there with her. In that house. I hate thinking about you sleeping in that bed. Damon. It's not a house. It's a museum. A stage. You're my home, Viv. Soon, I promise. Everything is lining up. Vivienne. When, Damon? When is soon? The waiting is killing me. What about the complication? Damon. After the Olympus launch. I just need to handle the exit strategy delicately. The complication will be handled. A clean break is best for everyone. Complication. The word struck Celeste with the force of a physical blow. Her hand flew to her mouth, a strangled sob caught in her throat. The baby inside her kicked, a sharp, insistent jab, as if she could sense her mother's world tilting violently off its axis, her vision blurred with hot, angry tears as she scrolled up, her thumb moving with a morbid, unstoppable curiosity. She saw photos, Damon and Vivienne on a yacht, the Chicago sunset bleeding across the sky behind them, his arm wrapped around her waist with a possessive, intimate gesture Celeste hadn't received in months. In the photo, he looked happy. Genuinely, effortlessly happy. Lighter. Free from the weight of the legacy she had tried so desperately to help him carry. She waited for him that night, the tablet resting on the marble coffee table like a verdict. The air in the penthouse, usually so light and open, was thick with unspoken words, heavy with the impending doom of a coming storm. When Damon walked in, whistling softly, he saw her face first, then the tablet. The mask of the charming, unflappable CEO slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing a flicker of raw panic. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a cold, unnerving resolve. Celeste, he began, his voice low, cautious, the sound of a man preparing his defense. Don't, she whispered, her voice cracking on the single word. Don't you dare try to lie to me, Damon. Just tell me why. He let out a long, weary sigh, running a hand through his perfectly coiffed hair. He didn't look at her. He looked past her, out at the glittering tapestry of city lights, as if she were just another part of the scenery. It just happened, Cel. These things, they're not planned. They're messy. These things? Her voice rose, laced with a hysteria she couldn't control. You mean an affair with your employee? An affair you've been having while I am at home, carrying your child? She gestured to her swollen belly, the physical evidence of their shared life, their supposed future. We were building a life, Damon. A family. Were we? He finally turned to face her, and the warmth she had once cherished in his eyes was gone. They were the cold, assessing eyes of a stranger, a businessman evaluating a failed investment. Or were we just playing a part, the perfect couple in the perfect home? It was suffocating, Celeste. The pressure, the expectations, my father's legacy, this baby. He gestured vaguely at her stomach, and the casual cruelty of the motion stole her breath. "The baby," she repeated, her hand instinctively, protectively, covering her womb. "It changes everything," he said, the words cold and precise, each one a carefully placed stone building a wall between them. "It makes everything permanent, irreversible. Vivian. She understands me. She understands the pressure I'm under. With her, I can just be myself." "And who are you?" Celeste choked out, the tears now streaming freely down her face, hot trails of humiliation and heartbreak. "Who are you, really?" "I'm a man who needs to make a choice," he said, his posture straightening as he fully inhabited his corporate persona. The decision had been made long before this conversation. This was just the formal termination. "And I choose her. I'm sorry, Celeste. I truly am. But I can't live a lie anymore." The apology was a hollow courtesy, an empty shell of an emotion. He wasn't sorry for breaking her heart. He was sorry it had to be so messy. "So that's it?" she gasped, the room starting to spin. "You throw away our marriage, our family for her?" "I'll have my lawyer contact yours in the morning," he continued, his tone as detached as if he were discussing a quarterly report. "I'll be generous, of course. We'll sell the penthouse. You'll be well taken care of." He thought money could fix this. He thought he could write a check and absolve himself of the devastation he had wrought, balancing the books on their life together. The next morning, the cruelty was compounded, twisted into a new, more public form of humiliation. Her mind a thick fog of grief and sleeplessness, she went to her office at Sterling Holdings, clinging to the last piece of her identity, determined to maintain some semblance of normalcy. Her keycard, the one that granted her access to the building she had helped design, blinked red. Access denied. Confused, she went to the front desk. The receptionist, a kind, older woman named Maria, looked at her with an expression of profound pity. "Oh, Miss Quinn, Celeste. A memo came through this morning. From Mr. Sterling's office." She hesitated, unable to meet Celeste's eyes. "Your contract has been terminated, effective immediately." "What?" The word was a faint puff of air, lost in the cavernous, marble-clad lobby. "It cited corporate restructuring and redundancy of your role." Redundancy. She had been made redundant, not just as a wife, but as a professional. He was erasing her, methodically, efficiently, and without a trace of sentiment. He had taken her home, her husband, her job, and her future, all in less than 12 hours. She stood there, in the gleaming lobby of the company she had poured her heart and soul into, a place where her own designs were etched into the very walls. And she had never felt more powerless. She was 6 months pregnant, unemployed, and about to be homeless. Damon hadn't just left her. He had set fire to her entire world and walked away without looking back at the flames. The gleaming penthouse on Michigan Avenue was replaced by a cramped third-floor walk-up in Pilsen, a neighborhood vibrant with colorful murals and the rich aroma of street food, but a universe away from the sterile opulence of her old life. The air in her new apartment was thick with the scent of damp drywall, old paint, and her own despair. The generous settlement Damon had promised was a lie. It became a protracted legal battle, orchestrated by his shark of a lawyer, a man who specialized in dismantling lives with surgical precision. They argued that her emotional state made her an unreliable negotiator, nickel and diming every asset, every shared memory, until she was left with a fraction of what she was owed, enough to secure the dingy apartment and little else. The first few weeks were a blur of sheer, primal survival. Morning sickness was a violent, daily reminder of the life growing inside her, the life Damon had dismissed as a complication. Some days, the grief was a physical weight that pinned her to the lumpy second-hand mattress, the city's symphony of sirens and car horns a mocking soundtrack to her misery. She'd lie there for hours, one hand pressed against her belly, feeling the faint, fluttering movements within. A war raged inside her, a fierce, primal love for this unborn child, and a terrifying, suffocating resentment for the circumstances of her existence. Her savings dwindled at an alarming rate. Humiliation became a constant companion, a shadow that followed her everywhere. One Tuesday, she found herself in line at a local food bank, her face hidden by a cheap scarf, her stomach churning with a shame so profound it felt like nausea. As she accepted a box of generic pasta, canned vegetables, and powdered milk, the woman ahead of her, a tired-looking mother with two small toddlers clinging to her legs, gave her a small, knowing smile. There was no judgment in her eyes, only a shared, weary understanding of hardship. That small, unexpected act of kindness broke something open in Celeste. She fled, hurrying back to her apartment as sobs racked her body, the weight of the charity box in her arms feeling as heavy as her failure. She was utterly, terrifyingly alone. Her parents had passed away in a car accident when she was in college, and Damon, she now realized, had systematically isolated her from her old friends. He had subtly discouraged her relationships, weaving a web of social engagements that revolved entirely around his world, his colleagues, his clients. The only person she could think of was Harper Reyes, her fiery, no-nonsense college roommate who now worked as a freelance journalist. They had drifted apart, a casualty of Celeste's absorption into Damon's gilded world, swallowing her pride, a pride that had already been pulverized into dust. She dialed the number she still knew by heart. "Celeste? Holy shit, is that you?" Harper's voice was a shock of warmth in her cold, silent world. The dam broke. Celeste poured out the whole sordid story, the words tumbling out in a torrent of pain, shame, and incoherent rage. She told her about Damon, Vivian, the baby, the firing, the food bank. She expected pity, or perhaps a gentle, "I told you so," because Harper had never been Damon's biggest fan, finding him as charming and as deep as a puddle of spilled champagne. Instead, there was a beat of charged silence on the other end of the line. "Okay," Harper said finally, her voice firm, devoid of pity. "So you can either lie there and let that narcissistic trust fund prick win, or you can get up and build a goddamn empire out of the ashes. He didn't just fire an architect, Cell. He fired a creator. He fired a woman who sees the world in lines and light and possibility. So for God's sake, create." The words were a splash of icy water to the face. "Create what, Harper?" Celeste cried, her voice thick with tears. "I have nothing. I am nothing." "Bullshit," Harper snapped back. "You have a mind that can design skyscrapers from the ground up. You have a master's degree in sustainable design that you've never really used because you were too busy propping up his glass and steel vanity projects. Most importantly, you have a baby on the way who is going to need a mother, not a martyr. Stop thinking about what he took from you and start thinking about what you still have." That night, for the first time in months, Celeste didn't cry herself to sleep. She lay awake, Harper's words echoing in the darkness of her small bedroom. He fired a creator. So create. She thought about the soulless, extravagant designs of Sterling Holdings, buildings that were monuments to wealth, but devoid of humanity. She thought about her real passion, the one she had suppressed to fit into Damon's world. Sustainable, human-centric design. Creating spaces that were not just beautiful, but functional, affordable, and kind to the environment. A flicker of an idea ignited in the darkness. She got up, went to the small, wobbly kitchen table, and with a pencil and a crumpled piece of paper from the charity box, she began to sketch. She didn't sketch skyscrapers or luxury penthouses. She sketched modular, adaptable furniture for small living spaces. She designed vertical gardens for apartment balconies, clever storage solutions that folded away into the walls. She conceptualized affordable, eco-friendly home kits for families who, like her, were starting over with nothing. The designs poured out of her, fueled by 3 months of repressed grief and a burgeoning anger that was finally, blessedly, transmuting into purpose. Her daughter, Aurora, Rory, was born on a cold December morning in a public hospital, the sterile smell of antiseptic a world away from the private suite she and Damon had once booked. Holding the tiny, 7-pound miracle in her arms, her perfect face a miniature echo of her own, Celeste felt a profound and permanent shift in her soul. The last vestiges of her victimhood fell away, burned off by the fierce, incandescent heat of a mother's love. This child was not a complication. She was a clarification. Rory was her why. With a small loan from Harper, who insisted it was an investment, not charity, Celeste bought a used laptop and a second-hand 3D printer. Her tiny apartment became her office, her workshop, and her nursery. She named her fledgling company Phoenix Designs, a name that was both a cliché and a profound personal truth. During the day, she cared for Rory, her world shrinking to the sweet scent of baby powder, the rhythm of feedings and naps, and the overwhelming love that filled every corner of her small apartment. At night, while Rory slept in a bassinet by her desk, lulled by the soft hum of the printer, Celeste worked. She built a website, taught herself digital marketing through free online tutorials, and started posting her designs on social media. The beginning was painfully slow. A few sales on Etsy, a custom bookshelf for a neighbor down the hall. But her designs were innovative, beautiful, and born of real-world necessity. Her story, which she shared with a raw and unapologetic honesty on a blog Harper helped her set up, began to resonate. People were drawn to the idea of a woman rebuilding her life, one beautifully designed, sustainable product at a time. Her first big break came from an influential design blogger who discovered her modular Grow With Me children's furniture line, a crib that converted into a toddler bed, then a desk, inspired by her own needs for Rory. The feature went viral overnight. Orders started pouring in, overwhelming her tiny operation. Harper came over after work to help her pack boxes. The kind woman from the food bank, whose name she learned was Rosa, became her first employee, helping with assembly in the evenings for cash. Phoenix Designs grew, slowly at first, then with gathering momentum. Celeste moved from the cramped apartment to a small workshop in a converted warehouse, then a larger one. She hired more people, often single mothers and women re-entering the workforce, creating the supportive, flexible work environment that was the absolute antithesis of the cutthroat, patriarchal culture at Sterling Holdings. She was a demanding boss. Her standards for quality and design were exacting, but she was fair, empathetic, and she paid a living wage. She was building more than a company. She was building a community. She never looked up Damon. She never checked his social media or allowed herself to wonder about his life with Vivian. She poured all her energy forward, refusing to look back at the fire, focusing only on the structure she was building from its ashes. But sometimes, late at night, after Rory was asleep and the workshop was quiet, she would stand by the window, and the ghost of her past life would visit. She would remember the betrayal, the powerlessness, the coldness in his eyes, and she would feel not just sadness, but a mrezu hardening in her gut. It wasn't about revenge, not anymore. It was about reclaiming her own story. It was about ensuring that no one, no man, no company, no circumstance could ever hold that kind of power over her again. 3 years passed in a whirlwind of early mornings, late nights, strategic decisions, and the joyful, chaotic bliss of raising a daughter. The Chicago skyline, once a painful symbol of her loss, was now the backdrop to her triumph. From her office on the 40th floor of a sleek, modern tower in the West Loop, a building celebrated for its LEED Platinum certification, Celeste Quinn could see the imposing, arrogant silhouette of the Sterling Holdings headquarters several blocks away. It no longer stirred a painful lurch in her gut. Instead, it elicited a quiet, analytical curiosity, the way a scientist might observe a dying star. Phoenix Designs was no longer a kitchen table startup. It was a multi-million-dollar force in the sustainable architecture and design industry. Its innovative approach to affordable, eco-conscious living solutions had captured the zeitgeist. They had won prestigious design awards, been featured in Forbes and Architectural Digest, and Celeste, once the disgraced, abandoned wife, was now a celebrated CEO, a reluctant poster child for female empowerment and entrepreneurial resilience. She was a different woman. The softness in her features had been honed into a sharp, intelligent elegance. Her wardrobe of bespoke suits and architectural dresses, all from ethical designers, was her armor. Her voice, once prone to trembling, was now measured and confident, capable of commanding a boardroom of investors or soothing her daughter's scraped knee with equal authority. Rory, a bright, curious 3-year-old with Damon's dark, wavy hair and her mother's determined green eyes, was the sun around which Celeste's universe orbited. Their home, a beautifully restored brownstone in Lincoln Park that Celeste had redesigned herself, was filled with light, laughter, and the innovative, life-affirming products her company created. It was a sanctuary built not on wealth, but on purpose. The only man in her life, besides the contractors and engineers she managed with formidable efficiency, was Adrian Kai. A sharp, insightful venture capitalist who had been one of Phoenix's early and most ardent investors, Adrian saw more than just a profitable business. He saw the fire and brilliance in Celeste. Their relationship was one of deep mutual respect and a simmering, unspoken attraction. He understood her boundaries, the guarded fortress she had built around her heart, and he never pushed. He was her ally, her confidant, and perhaps one day, something more. But for now, Celeste's focus remained singular: her daughter and her company. The news about Sterling Holdings came to her through Adrian. It wasn't a sudden dramatic collapse, but a slow, creeping decay she had half expected. "Damon's been bleeding the company dry for years," Adrian explained over coffee in her office, sliding a tablet across the polished bamboo desk. It was filled with financial reports, market analysis, and damning internal reviews. "He's all flash, no substance. He sank a fortune into that Olympus Tower vanity project, which is now half empty and hemorrhaging money. He's taken on massive debt. His leadership style is autocratic, and he's completely missed the shift in the market towards sustainable and mixed-use developments. He's still building glass palaces for the 1%, while the rest of the world is looking for community and affordability." Celeste scrolled through the data, her mind coolly dissecting the numbers. She recognized the patterns of arrogance and short-sightedness. Damon had always been seduced by prestige over pragmatism, by the grand gesture over the sound investment. "Their stock is at an all-time low," Adrian continued, his eyes watching her carefully, gauging her reaction. "The board is panicking. They're vulnerable, incredibly vulnerable." He paused, letting the weight of his next words settle in the air between them. "Vulnerable enough for a hostile takeover." Celeste looked up from the tablet, her heart giving a sudden, powerful thud against her ribs. The idea was audacious, terrifying, and deeply, intoxicatingly compelling. Buy the company that had fired her? The company that was her ex-husband's entire identity? His birthright? "It's not just about him, is it?" she said, the question directed more at herself than at Adrian. He nodded, understanding her immediately. "No, I did some digging. He's planning a massive layoff to try and stop the bleeding. Over 500 employees. Many of them, like Maria at your old front desk, have been there for decades. Their pensions, their futures. It's all on the chopping block so he and his little marketing guru can keep living their lavish lifestyle." Vivian. The name still left a bitter taste in her mouth. Celeste had heard through the industry grapevine that she was now the executive vice president of marketing at Sterling, a position for which she had little qualification beyond her relationship with the CEO. Celeste thought of Maria, the kind receptionist. She thought of the junior architects who had looked up to her, the dedicated engineers who had respected her. These were the people who would pay the price for Damon's hubris and Vivian's ambition. The motive, sharp and clear, crystallized in her mind. This wasn't about revenge. Revenge was a hot, messy emotion, and Celeste was all cool precision now. This was about justice. It was about rectifying a wrong on a scale she had never imagined possible. It was about saving the livelihoods of hundreds of people and transforming a toxic, dying monolith into something that could be innovative and humane. It was about taking the power back, not to crush him, but to build something better from the wreckage he had created. It was the ultimate Phoenix project. "What would it take?" she asked, her voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside her. A slow, knowing smile spread across Adrian's face. He knew that look in her eyes. It was the same look she'd had when she first pitched Phoenix Designs to him years ago, armed with nothing but a battered laptop and a ferocious, unshakable will to succeed. "It would take everything you've got," he said, his tone serious. "Financially, it would be a stretch, even for Phoenix. We'd need to bring in other investors, form a consortium. I can make the calls. The real question is, are you ready for the fight? He won't go down easy. It will get personal. It will get ugly." Celeste thought of the food bank line. She thought of the nights spent crying on a lumpy mattress, her hand on her pregnant belly. Feeling utterly alone, she thought of holding her newborn daughter, terrified, and yet filled with a strength she never knew she possessed. Then she thought of Rory, now sleeping peacefully in her bed, safe and loved. She had already survived the ugliest fight of her life. This was just business. "He has no idea what's coming," Celeste said, a glacial calm settling over her. "Let's make the calls, Adrian. Let's buy his company." The plan was executed with the precision of a military campaign. Adrian and Celeste formed a private investment group, Phoenix Capital, quietly buying up huge blocks of Sterling Holdings stock through various shell corporations to avoid tipping their hand. They leveraged Phoenix's sterling reputation and Celeste's compelling story to bring other powerful, forward-thinking investors on board, all of whom were hungry for a change in leadership at the floundering real estate giant. Damon remained blissfully, arrogantly oblivious. He was too busy planning a lavish gala to celebrate the resilience of Sterling Holdings, a desperate PR move orchestrated by Vivian to quell the rampant rumors of their financial trouble. While they were picking out floral arrangements and approving catering menus, Celeste and her team were executing a multi-million-dollar corporate raid. Within 2 weeks, they had secured a 51% controlling interest. The final call was made to the chairman of the board, an old family friend of the Sterlings, who, faced with the undeniable numbers and the promise of a revitalized company under Celeste's visionary leadership, reluctantly agreed to call an emergency board meeting. The day of the meeting, Celeste dressed with meticulous care. She chose a charcoal gray suit with sharp, clean lines that spoke of power and precision. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon. Her only jewelry was a simple pair of diamond studs, a gift to herself on the first anniversary of Phoenix Designs. She looked in the mirror and saw not the woman who had been broken, but the woman who had put herself back together, stronger and more formidable than before. As she rode the private elevator up to the top floor of the Sterling Holdings building, she felt a strange sense of calm. This wasn't a homecoming. It was an exorcism. She was finally ready to face the ghosts of her past, not as a victim, but as their master. The boardroom at Sterling Holdings was exactly as Celeste remembered it, a cavern of dark, polished wood, gleaming chrome, and suffocating ego. The long mahogany table reflected the grim, anxious faces of the board members, a collection of old guard businessmen who looked as though they were attending a funeral for their own fortunes. At the head of the table, in a throne-like leather chair, sat Damon. When Celeste walked in, flanked by Adrian Kai and her legal team, a collective gasp seemed to suck the very air out of the room. Damon's face cycled through a rapid series of emotions: confusion, disbelief, and finally, a dark, simmering rage. He looked at her as if she were a ghost who had wandered into the wrong haunting ground. Vivian, seated slightly behind him in a carefully staged display of subordinate devotion, turned a sickly shade of white, her perfectly glossed lips parting in a silent "oh" of shock. "Celeste?" Damon finally managed, his voice a hoarse, strangled whisper. "What the hell are you doing here?" Celeste didn't answer him. She walked with a calm, deliberate pace to the empty chair at the opposite end of the table, a seat reserved for the highest power in the room, and placed her leather portfolio down with a soft, definitive thud. The sound echoed in the tense silence. "Good morning, members of the board," she said, her voice clear and resonant, filling the room with an authority it hadn't heard in years. "For those of you who don't know me, my name is Celeste Quinn. As of 8:15 this morning, my investment group, Phoenix Capital, acquired a 51% controlling interest in Sterling Holdings, which means, as of now, I am in charge." The statement landed like a grenade. Chaos erupted. Damon shot to his feet, his chair scraping violently against the floor. "This is insane! It's impossible!" he sputtered, his face turning a blotchy, unattractive red. "You can't do this! This is my family's company!" "It was your family's company, Damon," Celeste corrected him, her gaze as cold and sharp as ice. "Now it's a publicly traded corporation, and you, unfortunately, have driven its value into the ground with your mismanagement. Please, sit down. We have a lot to discuss." Her unnerving calm seemed to unhinge him more than any screaming match could have. He remained standing, trembling with an impotent fury that made him look small and pathetic. Celeste turned her attention to the stunned board. "I've reviewed the financials for the last 3 fiscal years. I've seen the spiraling debt, the over-leveraged assets, and the catastrophic failure of the Olympus Tower project. A project, I might add, that diverted nearly 40% of the company's capital based on ego rather than sound market research." She paused, letting the indictment hang in the air. "I've also seen the plan for the impending restructuring, firing 512 employees to cover your losses, Damon. Was that your brilliant idea, or did it come from your executive vice president of marketing?" She flicked a cool, dismissive glance at Vivian, who flinched as if she'd been physically struck. "This is a private board matter," Damon snarled, grasping for some semblance of control. "Not anymore," Adrian Kai interjected smoothly, his voice a calm counterpoint to Damon's rage. Ms. Quinn now holds the authority to review and reverse any and all executive decisions. Damon's desperation began to curdle into something uglier, more manipulative. He changed tactics, his voice dropping into a tone of faux intimacy that made Celeste's skin crawl. "Celeste, listen to me. We have a history. We have a child together," he said, the words tasting like poison in the air. "You can't do this to me. To us." The room fell silent. He had dared to bring Rory into this. He had invoked the name of the child he had never met, never supported, never even asked about, as a shield. A wave of pure, white-hot fury washed over Celeste, a rage so intense it was almost clarifying. She forced it down, compressing it into a diamond-hard point of resolve. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes locking onto his, and all the pain, all the lonely nights, all the fear of the past 3 years were distilled into her next words. "Do not," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level that was more terrifying than any shout, "ever speak my daughter's name in this room. You forfeited the right to call yourself her father the day you called her a complication and walked out on us. You have no idea what us is. Us was me, alone in a tiny apartment, wondering how I was going to afford diapers. Us was me building a company from nothing while raising our daughter by myself. You are not a part of that us. You are a ghost, a bad memory." Damon paled, speechless. He had expected tears, emotional appeals, a messy scene. He was not prepared for this surgeon-like precision, this cold, factual evisceration of his pathetic attempt at manipulation. Vivienne, seeing her man falter, decided to step in, her voice high and strained. "You're just doing this for revenge," she accused, trying to paint Celeste as a scorned woman. "You're bitter, and you want to destroy him because he chose me." Celeste turned her gaze to Vivienne, studying her not as a rival, but as a flawed business problem. "You think this is about him?" she asked with a small, mirthless smile. "Ms. Vale, you have been the executive VP of marketing for 2 years. In that time, the company's brand recognition has plummeted, and your only major campaign was for the Olympus Tower, a project that is now a financial black hole. Your primary qualification for this role seems to be your relationship with the CEO. That isn't bitterness. That is a fact from your own disastrous performance review. You are a liability to this company, just as he is." The direct, factual nature of the attack left Vivienne sputtering. Under the weight of Celeste's steely gaze, the facade of their power coupledom began to crack. Damon, instead of defending her, shot Vivienne a venomous look, as if it were her fault they were in this mess. In that single, fleeting glance, Celeste saw their entire relationship for what it was, a shallow alliance of convenience, now crumbling under pressure. Celeste stood up, moving to the head of the table, physically claiming the seat of power. She was in complete command. "Here is what is going to happen," she announced, her voice ringing with clarity and purpose. "The planned layoffs are canceled, effective immediately. Every employee contract will be reviewed, and all pensions will be protected. We will be pivoting away from luxury monoliths and investing heavily in sustainable, mixed-use community projects, the very market that Phoenix Designs has come to dominate. We are going to rebuild this company from the ground up, based on innovation, integrity, and fiscal responsibility." She looked directly at Damon, her expression unreadable, a perfect mask of corporate control. "As for the current leadership, a company cannot heal with poison still in its veins. Damon Sterling, your position as CEO is terminated. Vivienne Vale, Your position as Executive Vice President is also terminated. Your access has been revoked. Security will escort you from the building. You will have 1 hour to clear out your personal effects under supervision. It was the same cold, corporate language he had used to fire her 3 years ago. The symmetry was brutal and beautiful. "You bitch," Damon finally breathed, the last of his composure gone, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. "After everything, you're going to just throw me out?" Celeste looked at him, and for the first time she felt not anger, not sadness, but a profound and weary pity. He was just a small, hollow man, inflated by a legacy he could never live up to. "You threw me out when I was 6 months pregnant and had nothing, Damon," she said, her voice devoid of malice, stating it as a simple point of historical record. "The difference is I'm not leaving you with nothing. I'm leaving you with the consequences of your own choices. That's something you've never had to face before. It's time you learned." She turned her back on him, a final, definitive act of dismissal, and addressed the stunned board. "The transition will begin immediately. I'll need a new leadership team, and I will be promoting from within based on merit, not nepotism. We have a lot of work to do." As 2 uniformed security guards entered the room and walked purposefully towards a defeated Damon and a weeping Vivian, Celeste did not watch. She was already looking forward, at the skyline beyond the window, at the future she was about to build on the foundations of her past. The reckoning was over. The reconstruction was about to begin. In the weeks that followed, Celeste moved through the offices of Sterling Holdings, soon to be rebranded as Phoenix Sterling Synergy, like a restorative force of nature. The oppressive, fear-based culture that Damon had cultivated began to dissipate, replaced by a cautious but growing sense of optimism. She didn't occupy Damon's ostentatious corner office, with its panoramic views and intimidating aura. Instead, she chose a smaller, glass-walled office in the center of the main floor, making herself visible and accessible. The message was clear. The era of the untouchable monarch was over. She held town halls, listening to the concerns of employees who had been ignored for years. She walked the floors, learning the names of the architects, engineers, and administrative staff, her genuine interest a stark contrast to Damon's aloofness. She promoted Maria, the receptionist who had shown her kindness on her worst day, to her executive assistant, a move that sent a powerful message throughout the company. Loyalty, kindness, and competence would be rewarded. The junior architects she had once mentored were now given lead roles on exciting new projects that focused on community and sustainability. The dead weight, the cronies Damon had hired, was cut, but the heart of the company, its talented and dedicated workforce, was saved and nurtured. One afternoon, Adrian Kai found her staring out her office window, a pensive look on her face. "A penny for your thoughts?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe, his presence a comforting constant. "I was just thinking," she said, a small wry smile playing on her lips, "that I spent so long trying to forget this place, to erase it from my memory, and now I'm spending all my time trying to fix it." "It's not the same place, Celeste," he said softly. "You changed it. You took away its power to hurt you and gave it a new purpose. That's not fixing something broken. That's creating something new." He was right. The building was no longer a monument to her pain. It was just a building. The power it held was the power she gave it. And she was choosing to give it the power to heal, to build, to create good in the world. The weight she had carried for 3 years, the ghost of Damon's betrayal, had finally, completely lifted. She felt light. Her true empire, her real sanctuary, remained her home. That evening, she was on the floor of Rory's playroom, building a towering castle out of colorful magnetic blocks, one of Phoenix Design's best-selling toys. Rory, with her bright, infectious laugh, placed a final, crooked block on the very top. "It's the biggest castle ever, Mommy," she declared with the absolute certainty of a 3-year-old. "Yes, it is, my love," Celeste said, pulling her daughter into a fierce hug, breathing in the sweet, irreplaceable scent of her hair. This was her empire. Not the steel and glass tower downtown, but this small, perfect kingdom of love and laughter. Damon had tried to contact her once, through a lawyer, begging for a meeting. She had refused without a moment's hesitation. There was nothing left to say. His story in her life was over. Hers was still being written. Her redemption wasn't found in that boardroom, in the cold, satisfying act of firing the man who had wronged her. That had been a necessary closing of a chapter, a balancing of the scales. Her true redemption was here, in the quiet, ordinary moments of her life. It was in the knowledge that she had built a life of purpose and integrity on her own terms. It was in seeing her daughter grow up in a world where her mother was not a victim, but the architect of her own destiny. It was in the quiet strength she now wore, not as armor, but as her own skin. The sky above her was open and endless, and for the first time in a long, long time, she was ready to fly. Celeste Quinn's story is a powerful testament to the fact that our deepest wounds can become the source of our greatest strength. She transformed the ultimate betrayal into a catalyst for breathtaking success, not for simple revenge, but for a profound reclamation of her life and power. She didn't just buy a company, she rebuilt her world, her purpose, and her dignity on a foundation of resilience, intelligence, and integrity. Her journey reminds us that you can either be crushed by your past or you can choose to build your future upon it. The choice, in the end, is always yours. What did you think of Celeste's incredible transformation? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If her story of strength and perseverance inspired you, please hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and be sure to subscribe for more unforgettable stories of triumph over adversity. Thank you for watching.